We're a proud member of the Paranormality Podcast Network, where you'll find podcasts such as Cryptids, Belief Hole, Paranormal Universe, and I Have a Strange Story podcast. On this episode, I sat down and talked with Ashley and Molly from the Demons and Bellinis podcast, and they have a very unique outlook on the paranormal. So relax, grab a drink. But before we talk to Ashley and Molly, I'm Jack Kirby, and this is Paranormality, paranormal podcast we listen to. Be sure to check us out on all our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And also, if you want to get in on the conversation, join our Facebook group, Paranormal Podcasts We Listen To. All the links are going to be in the show notes. And now let's talk to Ashley and Molly. Well, hello, Molly and Ashley. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
So let's talk about your podcast a little bit. How about you describe the show for someone who's never heard it before?
Oh no. I mean, we were talking about this before, and both of us are kind of joking, like, oh, it's a mess, it's all over the place, but that's really kind of what our podcast is all over the place, because we will write our own script, and we go back and forth between who's kind of hosting the episode. So we really only write a kind of script when it's our episode, and everything else is just us like riffing off of each other, hanging out, kind of just saying whatever comes to mind. But I mean, really, we just wanted to have a like time when we could like tell each other these spooky stories, and I don't know, it's just sometimes you think that the paranormal community is missing like a manic teenage girl kind of energy, and so we definitely bring that.
You do, and I like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more fun than just hanging out with a friend and just telling a bunch of spooky stories.
Yeah,
it certainly brings you back to that, like...
It's very much like when you have a whole bunch of friends and you're at a sleepover, just kind of, seeing who can tell each other the worst kind of story.
Exactly, yeah.
It actually reminds me of my high school days because, I'm old as dirt, and we would do the same things. We would go on like paranormal adventures, and that's why I like your podcast, because it reminds me of how I was when I was younger.
Thank you.
It's the nostalgia.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun to just hang out with a friend and just talk a bunch of shit about demons. And, I mean, I feel like with fear, there's always going to be an element of humor to it to make yourself feel better. So I feel like the two contrast, or like, they collaborate very well together.
Yeah. I think it's good to make jokes out of things that you're scared of, because it makes it, I think, a little easier to deal with or like think about, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes it less scary to comprehend what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that's another thing that we did a lot of, was after we had a weird experience, we would joke about it and just make stupid wisecracks, that teenage boys would do. Where can people find you guys at?
We're on a couple different platforms. We used to upload YouTube videos, but I mean, they didn't really do very well. So we've kind of switched away from that. Plus it was a lot of work. So these days we're on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, I think a few others. We're on Google Play. We're doing our best to get onto Apple Podcasts, but they're a little bit difficult.
Yes, they require everything.
They really do.
Like, I remember the last time I tried doing something, and then it asked for something else, and I was like, oh, okay. Let me go add this to the list.
Yeah, I mean, we commissioned an entire art piece for our header, which we were very grateful for. But we did do it primarily for the sake of getting onto Apple, and it still hasn't allowed us to. But
it's a great cover.
Sure will happen. That's true.
We don't have my graphic design as my passion kind of cover anymore. So
tragic.
What about social media? What social medias are you guys on?
We mostly do Instagram and Twitter.
We do have a Tumblr,
but I haven't updated that, so I'm conflicted about it because it's so like Tumblr is like the worst kind of website, like social media website, but it's also the best if you get good at it. So Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, I have not been on Tumblr in probably 10 years, I'd say.
It's gotten worse.
It is a place, to be sure.
It's a place. That's all it is.
Yeah, you get all kinds of people there who are just more than willing to express their ideas and their weird passions.
But I mean, I will give it credit because I definitely think like you and me, Molly, were definitely children of Tumblr, if you want to call us that.
I would call it that.
Like, our humor has definitely been influenced by it, so I mean, as much as we trash it, we're trashing ourselves in the end.
Definitely.
So let's talk about creepy stuff and scary stuff. I forget who it was. One of you didn't believe in the paranormal or didn't get into the paranormal until a later age, and the other one was into the paranormal younger. Which is which?
Well, I've always been terrified of everything and anything. You know, I was in Scouts as a kid, and we would definitely get those spooky stories. Someone would bring out, you know, the Encyclopedia of Canadian Hauntings and spooky stories to tell in the dark. And I would just be terrified. I wouldn't want to hear it. Any bump or squeak in the night, I would just be absolutely out of there. But I suppose a little bit later in life, I found a lot of comfort in that because to a certain extent with horror stories, I'm an English major, so I get a lot of inspiration from stories, whatnot. I think that it's kind of an escapism because you can let out your fear in a healthy way that doesn't actually pertain to your real life. So it's a little bit of an escapist. And I mean, I got into witchcraft later in life, so that was also something that definitely influenced that, understanding energies. Because at the end of the day, I mean, like, as someone who practices with energies, sometimes ghosts come in my house every once in a while just because they're attracted to it.
Which is rude. They should be knocking.
They really should. But, you know, at the end of the day, I feel like they're just lonely. They just want someone to talk to. They get happy when you say hi. I think it's kind of fun.
I mean, yeah. I mean, for me, I always thought that people, like, when I was growing up, I just assumed that everyone believed in ghosts because that was the household that I grew up in until I got older, and I was like, oh, this isn't a common thing.
So you grew up in a haunted house?
No, I grew up with a haunted mom. When she was a kid, she had all these crazy paranormal stories. She moved around the country all the time and lived in all these old houses, and then she claims that because of that, she's kind of developed this kind of sense for spirits. And I have a few crazy stories. Like, I was just thinking about them, like, earlier today. Some of them, like, I remember one, we were staying at this very small hotel in a very small town in Ontario. It's called Elliott Lake. And Elliott Lake used to be a mining town. And then in the 30s, all the mines shut down. And so a lot of miners, they had no way to support their families, so a lot of them ended up ending their lives. We were staying at this hotel, and my mom, she goes into the bathroom, and then she turns around and comes back out. She's like, there's a man in the bathtub. And we're like, okay, cool, all right, there's no one in there, but okay. So my dad, he goes downstairs to the front desk and just casually asks, like, has anyone died in this room before? And it turns out that a miner actually electrocuted himself in the bathtub. And she had no idea about that story until she asked. So it's like, just these different kind of stories. I mean, and then me, myself, I don't have this kind of sense. I don't know, I mean, I felt like cold spots. And then I had a door close on me the other day, which was, oh God.
Yeah, and your new job as a museum worker.
Yeah.
A bunch of old artifacts.
Yeah.
And that's creepy in itself.
Yeah. The museum I work at, it's a railroad station that was built in 1908. So we have like a huge collection and a lot of things are donated to us. And in the interview they asked me, are you afraid of ghosts? Just casually, like, last question of the interview. Are you afraid of ghosts, by the way? They didn't ask me why, or didn't tell me why. They just slid that one in at the end. And they asked the other kid who got hired with me the same question, too. So on the second day, we were talking to each other. We're like, did you get asked that question, too? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I don't want to go in the basement. But anyway, so in the basement's where we have all of our archives, because it's nice and temperature controlled down there. Artifacts they're very temperamental.
Just like me.
So I'm working down there, and there's this heavy door, and I have my back to the door, and I keep it open with the wooden door stopper. So I get in there at 9:30 in the morning, kick the door stopper in, and get to work. An hour later, I hear the wooden door stopper sliding on the floor, and I turn around and watch the door close until the stopper catches it again. And I froze, and my hands were shaking so bad. And I still can't rule it out if it was paranormal or just I didn't kick the door stopper in far enough. But that's the only time I've ever seen that door close when the door stopper's kicked in.
Do you want to find other paranormal, conspiracy, horror, and sci-fi podcasts? Visit paranormalityradio.com.
Because there's been full days where the door has not closed and the door stopper has been in. So I don't know.
I mean, to a certain extent, though, I feel like a lot of ghosts do carry an aura, I guess, just like fear and frighten. So, I mean, like, if you did have those anxieties, then that's also a sign, you know?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's just me, though. I hear anything and I'm like... But especially down there, because it's very claustrophobic. And when you get into, we have, the rolling shelves, and when you're in those shelves, it can be a little... oof sometimes. But it was just a weird experience. I haven't had anything else down there happen this week, so I'll take it.
I mean, when they actually throw that question in the interview, that tells me that there's been several people who've had experiences in that place.
Mm-hmm. All I know is that something happened to a past museum assistant in the basement. That's all they told me. I don't know what happened to her. I don't know what if she saw something. That's all I know. And I'm too nervous to ask at this point.
So what I'm picturing in my head right now is the scene from Ghostbusters when they go into the library. And yeah, that's what happened to that worker.
Yeah, 100%. Goo and everything.
It's just very cold, very claustrophobic. There's so much stuff down there. It can be a little hard to navigate, and you hear people above you walking on the floor. You hear pipes. You hear just a lot of different things, and it's a very uncomfy environment sometimes.
Sounds really sexy.
That's not. I just come down the stairs like, hello.
I had a friend who, she actually works as a scare employee in a haunted house, like an amusement park, and apparently the place is actually haunted. So by shadow people. So every morning and every night they all have to go in and say, "Hello, shadow people. Goodbye, shadow people." Because again, they just like to be acknowledged.
Wait,
just like you and me.
Is this the same person who they left a sweater or something there overnight, and then when they took the sweater home with them, something followed them home?
Yes.
Oh.
That is creepy. No.
Yeah.
They can keep
it's
the
like
sweater.
You just want to work
it's just their sweater now.
Minimum wage job. You're just trying to do your 9 to 5, and then all of a sudden a ghost follows you home. It's very rude of them.
So, Molly, you said you've actually had ghosts come into your house or into your room?
Yes.
That is awesome.
Definitely.
Now...
Well, I mean... Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, now, is it one of those things when you're meditating or you're channeling energies from crystals or even candle magic?
Typically, yeah. Usually they just like to see what's kind of going on. They're mostly harmless spirits. They're just curious. I've had like a couple experiences where I feel like they haven't been completely on board, but usually just then I just protect myself. I try to ignore it. I mean, they've never been malicious towards me, just sending some negative vibes every once in a while. But could also just be anxiety. It's hard to say. Kind of all in the same realm there.
Now, do you believe in powers of the Ouija board?
I am too afraid of the Ouija board, actually, because I think that a Ouija board is very similar to a car, where you need the proper training. You need to really learn how to use it, because if you're using it just to channel something, totally fine. But if you are not experienced with it, it can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, my mom, she never warned me about, like, the typical teenager stuff, but she did tell me, you never touch a Ouija board. She like drilled that into my head that you never touch one, or that I never touch one. She said that she had like some crazy experiences as a teenager, and at this point, I'm still too nervous to ask what went down. I think it's like what Molly said. It's like this is like what my mom talked about too. She said like they're very much a door, and like sometimes you're gonna open it and there'll just be nothing, but sometimes you open it and there might be something. And it could be the same thing with anything you use, whether it's like a Ouija board or, some audio recorder on your phone, and you're just asking someone, a ghost to come through. It's, I think it's a lot about like your intentions and what you're wanting to get out of it. And sometimes, it might not even matter what your intention is.
How did you guys get together? Because you have really good chemistry together. You really do. You bounce off of each other really well. Have you known each other for a long time, or how did this podcast come together?
We met in an English class in grade 12 of high school, our last year of high school.
We were also theater kids, so we met through the drama department.
And it was, Molly had just transferred to my high school, and like we didn't really know each other very well until this English class, and we bonded over our shared hatred of our English teacher.
He tried to argue that Taming of the Shrew was a good relationship.
I don't see how you argue that point, but
he spent a whole month and a half trying to do it, and he still didn't do it.
I just wanted to take a second to talk about Audible and how you can start your 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/paranormality. When I'm not listening to podcasts, I love to read. But the only problem is I don't have enough extra time in my day to sit down and read a book. And that's why I love Audible. And with thousands of titles to choose from in all different genres, the trouble's not going to be finding something. The trouble's going to be choosing something. But Audible is more than just audiobooks. They have podcasts, guided wellness programs, theatrical performances, comedy skits, and they also have exclusive Audible originals that you're not going to find anywhere else. You get a free book every month, so be sure to head over to audibletrial.com/paranormality and start your 30-day free trial today. audibletrial.com/paranormality.
Sure, like two people really getting each other is great in theory, but I don't think you should starve your wife.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
My boyfriend knows that if he deprives me of food for more than an hour, things will go bad.
I get hangry. I can't. I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with giving your point, as long as you're willing to argue it, and as long as you're willing to hear that back and forth.
Yeah, and this teacher was not willing to hear these grade 12s tell him that he was wrong.
And that he was maybe just a little bit sexist.
Just a little bit.
And then, I mean, like, we kept in touch. I think we felt a little bit out of touch slightly after high school. We got back into talking. We would marathon Ghost Adventures together when I was kind of finally getting back all that confidence and not being so scared of ghosts.
Ah, yes. Nothing to reunite friendship like Zach Bagans going,
Oh, it's great. That is TV. That is reality TV for you.
Comedy. Yeah. And then there's also, like, you got me into Drag Race, too. Like, I kind of was doing Drag Race, and then, like, you really got me into Drag Race, and then that's where our intros came from. like the intros we do.
Yeah, there was this YouTube show that these two drag queens who were on there would do, and they would introduce themselves. I mean, it's still going on. I don't know why I'm saying in the past tense. They introduce themselves in these very weird, metaphorical, odd ways, and we just thought it was the funniest thing, so that's where our intro started coming in from.
And then, like, our name, too, was, like, the whole starting of our podcast was really a joke. It was just, because I can't remember, because I came up with the name, and it was, like, maybe, like, a month or two after I had, like, had my first ever drink, which was a Bellini, and I couldn't stop thinking about Bellinis, you know? And so, I can't remember the exact context, but I was in the car with my mom, and all of a sudden I turned to her and I go, I have an idea. Picture this. Ghost tour, right? It's like a walking ghost tour. And you go to all these different haunted locations, but at every haunted location, not only do they tell you about the place, but they give you a Bellini while you're there. And my mom, she's like, Ash, that's dangerous.
It's just a haunted bar hop. It's fine.
Yeah. But no, but my mom shot me down, but I explained this to Molly, and she goes, that's a great podcast name. And then literally 2 hours later, she sends me this intro. I'm like, okay, I guess we're doing this now.
So wait, your mom pushed you into doing this podcast, yet you still won't let her listen to said podcast. That is great.
No, she didn't push me into it. She just said, like, your tour idea is probably too dangerous for the public.
I mean, like, there's nothing better than just getting pissed drunk and starting to talk to spirits. Plus, like, I don't know, I think about this a lot. If I was a spirit, where would I want to haunt? But I think that a bar would be a really fun place, because then you just get to fuck with a bunch of drunk people.
Absolutely nothing could go wrong.
When I die, I would love to do that. I would love to come back and just fuck with drunk people or stupid people. Either one.
Any other locations you would want to haunt?
I would definitely haunt my old high school. I think I'd also want to haunt a courthouse.
That's fun.
Oh, that'd be spicy.
Yeah, there's this courthouse. It's in this old maritime museum on an island nearby where we're from. And apparently it's haunted by this judge who absolutely just hates children.
So what are some of your upcoming topics you guys are going to talk about?
I'm really interested about talking about goat men, because I think that's just such a fun spectral entity.
I literally just found out about Goatman 2 months ago at most. I think, yeah, it was 2 months ago. I learned about Goatman, and now it's been popping up in my life like crazy.
Oh.
Well, I mean, the Goatman Bridge isn't even the only one. Like, I think there's this one. He has the best name ever. He's called the Poplik Monster. And he haunts this train trestle. I mean, like, the name is, like, the only funny thing about him, because he tempts people onto the train.
Wait, Molly, wait.
Yes.
Do all of these goat men have bridges?
There's a good amount of them.
Yeah.
Oh,
which
wow.
I think is so cool. Because, I mean, there's something very interesting about bridges. Like, I mean, as an English major who loves looking way too deep into anything, you know, like, they're places of travel. They're like an intermediary place. So I think it makes sense that there are a lot of haunted bridges. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing with this Poplik Monster is that he tempts people onto his tracks, and then a train will hit them. So he actually doesn't have to do any of his own dirty work. Yeah.
You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
You know, my wife says that all the time. I love it.
Too.
I love it.
I've never heard that before.
You haven't?
No.
Oh, it's such a good saying.
Yes, it is. So the Goatman story that I actually heard was the one in Texas. That's the first one I heard. Where the guy was a goat salesman, and they killed him and they beheaded him, and he put a goat head on in replacement of his own.
Yeah, that's the really common one. That's the one that I think BuzzFeed even went to.
But Shane Madej said, that's my bridge now. It's his bridge.
I mean, if you don't believe in ghosts, then, I mean, it's fine to just be mean to them, but I don't know if I would have that
to be my attitude to ghosts, but instead, like, I just have a door slide close on me and I can't move for like 15 minutes. So,
I
mean, for me, in terms of episodes I want to do, like, I really want to do the weird stuff, like the demon cat baby again. Like, those stories, like the really old ones from the medieval ages, even up until the 1800s, there's some really bizarre ones. Those are just so weird.
Well, there was also that one apartment, house in London that had the
50
octopus
Berkeley
creature.
Square!
Yes, which I actually visited this summer.
Victorian era hentai!
Yeah, it's one of the most haunted locations in London, and it has this octopus spirit, apparently. At least that's what we gathered.
An octopus spirit.
Yeah,
okay.
It was basically just like a bunch of smoke, and then they said tendrils would come out, which we interpreted, of course, in our drunk state as an octopus spirit.
Well, no, didn't you say something about, like, how someone said that sounded like a slapping?
It did.
Of some, like, meaty, kind of tentacle-y sound?
I think so, yeah.
There
are some fun ghost stories out there.
Yeah, I want to do weird stuff, and then because I know that I'm driving Molly up the wall with it because I keep talking about it, but I really want to do an episode about the Franklin expedition and their ghosts, or the people who thought that they had ghosts, which was like, it happened, like that mystery and whole event happened at a time when like the spiritualism movement in the 1800s was like really starting become a thing. And so a lot of people who got involved in that later on really got their start with this whole kind of frenzy over finding the lost men in the Franklin expedition. So.
But isn't that funny? Because the Inuit people, didn't they just say, oh yeah, it's over there. We know where it is. And no one listened to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the 1800s we're talking about, Molly.
Fair.
Instead of listening to the actual people like who lived there, they decided that they were going to listen to the ghosts instead. Take that as you will. I mean, so yeah, I keep talking about this and the show that's based off of it, so I'm gonna do it and then try not to talk about it again.
What is your favorite podcast that you are listening to right now?
Well, not that it needs any promotion, because I'm pretty sure this podcast is super popular, but I love Sword and Scale. It's a true crime podcast, and it's one of the first podcasts that I ever listened to, like, years ago, and I keep coming back to it. The host, Mike Boudet, he does this amazing job of, in a really unbiased way, of just presenting listeners with the case, and he gets a hold of, like, real 911 calls, real interrogation audio, real court audio. It can be really hard to listen to sometimes because it's the real stuff. But he just does this really great way of just putting it all together in front of you and being like, here it all is. It's up to you, the listener, to decide, like, was justice served here? Was the right thing done here? Or, did the motivation make sense or did it not? It's a really great show and I highly recommend it.
I tend to really like podcasts with two people who just bounce off each other really well, which I guess totally reflects our podcast. But I really like The Cryptid Keeper. I think they're also pretty big as well. They just talk about weird creatures, and they have a very intelligent banter about them. I think it's hosted by Addison and Alex, and they're both very intelligent people, and I really appreciate them just talking about, like they did this one episode that inspired my podcast episode on Robert Johnson, and they talked a lot about the perhaps less than ideal implications of having, this happen at Crossroads, having blues associated with the Crossroads. It was actually a really interesting one. I also really like Fairy Tall Tales, hosted by Jessica and Megan. They bounce off each other really well. I believe what they do there is that they talk about stories and then talk about a real case that happened. Fear and Fame, very similar. They talk about true crime, paranormal, conspiracy theories. It's great. I just like two people bouncing off each other. I like hanging out with people.
Once again, how can people find you and what platforms are you on?
Well, you can always find us on Instagram and Twitter. Tumblr if you want to get funky with it. We're on Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean. Oh, we're on Castbox as well.
And if you are looking for us on Twitter, we are DBellinis. I couldn't get our whole name in there. So we are
Capital D, capital B.
Yeah, DBellinis on Twitter and Demons and Bellinis on Instagram.
Yeah, and if you want us on another platform, just let us know and we'll try to find a way to upload it. Unless it's right away on Apple Podcasts because we're having difficulties.
And all those links are going to be in the show notes. So ladies, once again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having us.
This is really cool. Like, we've never done anything about this, and like when we got your email, we were like, oh, whoa. It was really awesome. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. If you like the show, go ahead and share it with all your friends. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Go knock on your neighbor's door. So until next week, I'm Jack.